In a confrontation between the Nova Corps and the Green Lantern Corps, who would win? In terms of power, the Nova Primes, the highest ranks of the Nova Corps, are formidable space warriors. Richard Rider, at the height of his power, faced off against Annihilus, Thanos, and the Silver Surfer, even defeating Annihilus and holding his own against the other two. A Nova Prime can defeat a Green Lantern in a duel. However, the number of Nova Primes is very limited, making up only a small portion of the Corps. Most of the remaining Nova members are significantly weaker and have difficulty fighting a regular Green Lantern. A single experienced Green Lantern can even defeat a small squad of Novas. In terms of composition, the Nova Corps is mainly composed of Xandarians, or human-like species, with a few rare exceptions such as Ego, or a member of the Fin Fang Foom species. Meanwhile, the Green Lantern Corps possesses powerful warriors such as the Daxamites, Kilowog, or the living planet Mogo. These entities are already powerful beings, and when enhanced by power rings, their power becomes overwhelming. The sky over Xandar was a rosy pink, the first rays of sunlight peeking out from behind the towering crystal spires. The Nova Corps' central city was bustling with the roar of patrol boats and the steady footsteps of warriors in golden armor. Richard Rider, the legendary Nova Prime, stood atop the citadel, his eyes cold as he scanned the horizon. He sensed an unnatural energy, something lurking in the depths of space. "Do you feel it, Rider?" The deep voice of Ko-Rel, a loyal Nova Centurion, rang out beside him. She stood tall, her black hair tied back, her eyes alert. "Something is wrong, space is trembling." Richard nodded, his hand tightening on the star-studded helmet. He had faced terrible foes like Annihilus and Thanos, but this felt different, an invisible threat, as if the cosmos were whispering of a coming war. "Prepare the Legion, I want everyone on standby," he ordered, his voice firm but worried. Beneath the glittering cobblestone streets, Nova members were bustling about. Young warriors like Sam Alexander, a newly recruited Nova, eager but raw, ran through the hallways to receive their assignments. Sam, with his youthful smile and fiery eyes, couldn't hide his excitement. "Who are we fighting, Rider? The Annihilation Wave again?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Richard looked at him, a smile flickering. "Not sure, kid, but if they are enemies, they'll regret targeting Xandar." Meanwhile, in another corner of the universe, on the planet Oa, the seat of power for the Green Lantern Corps, an emergency conference was taking place. The power rings glistening on the hands of the lanterns, from Hal Jordan to Kilowog, glowed a brilliant green, illuminating the central hall. On a raised platform, Ganthet, one of the Guardians, stood before thousands of lanterns, his voice booming like thunder. "Lanterns, a threat is rising," Ganthet announced. "The Nova Corps on Xandar are gathering strength, and there are signs that they are preparing for war. We cannot allow any force to threaten the balance of the universe." Hal Jordan, standing in the middle of the crowd, frowned. He was not one to be swayed by vague warnings. "Ganthet, the Nova Corps are not our enemies. They have fought alongside us before. Why are we fighting now?" he questioned, his voice filled with doubt. Kilowog, who stood next to Hal, growled. "I don't care why. If the Novas want to fight, I'll smash them to pieces." The ring on the giant's hand flashed, reflecting his indomitable will. Ganthet raised his hand for silence. "We do not seek war, but the will of the rings demands that we protect the peace. Prepare your ranks. If Xandar makes a move, we will respond." In the darkness of the hall, Mogo, the living planet and the most powerful Green Lantern, was emitting a faint pulse of energy. The entity did not speak, but its will was clear, ready to fight. The tension between the two legions did not arise from nowhere. A misunderstanding had crept in, planted by a mysterious entity who stood in the shadows, manipulating both sides. He called himself the Guide, an ancient being with powers beyond understanding. The Guide had no clear form, only a shadowy shadow, hovering among the stars, its eyes gleaming like black holes that devoured light. He sent false signals to both Xandar and Oa, causing each side to believe the other was preparing for an invasion. On Xandar, false intelligence reports showed the Green Lantern Corps gathering near their borders. On Oa, the Lanterns received false images of the Nova fleet heading their way. Unbeknownst to them, the Guide was smiling, waiting for the moment when the two most powerful forces in the universe would destroy each other. The war broke out one fateful day, when a Nova patrol accidentally crossed the boundary of the Green Lantern-controlled area. Hal Jordan, leading a team that included John Stewart and Kyle Rayner, intercepted them. "Get back, Nova," Hal shouted, his power ring glowing brightly. "You're not supposed to be here." Sam Alexander, leading the patrol, backed away, hands raised. "We're not looking for trouble, just checking for a strange signal." But before he could explain, a sudden explosion rang out from a Nova ship, green and yellow lights merging in a storm of energy. "It's a trap," Kyle Rayner shouted, his ring creating a giant shield to protect his team. But it was too late. The war spread, with hundreds of Green Lanterns and Novas charging at each other in a chaotic, interstellar battle. Richard Rider, from Xandar, saw the flash of light in the distance. His heart pounded. "No, it can't be," he whispered. He knew the Nova Corps could not face the overwhelming numbers and power of the Green Lanterns, but he couldn't stand still. Donning his helmet, he launched himself into space, the Nova force burning around him like a living star. The battle raged on. The Green Lantern rings created weapons ranging from lightsabers to giant war machines. Kilowog, with the strength of a living mountain, smashed an entire Nova fleet with a single energy punch. Mogo, from afar, fired green beams of light, destroying Nova warships as if they were nothing but pieces of paper. Richard Rider fought like a god. He charged through the ranks of the Lanterns, cutting down dozens of warriors with energy blows. But even he felt the pressure. Facing Hal Jordan, the two stood in a vortex of energy, green and yellow lights clashing violently. "Why, Jordan?" Richard shouted. "Why did you attack us?" Hal, with a strong will, replied, "You crossed the line. We had no choice." But in that moment, they both sensed something unusual. A dark energy was enveloping the battlefield. As the battle reached its climax, Mogo suddenly stopped. The living planet sent a psychic message to all the Lanterns and Novas. "Stop, we are being manipulated." Richard and Hal, though at odds, simultaneously realized the truth. They stopped fighting, turning to face the guide, who now revealed himself as a giant dark being, laughing loudly among the stars. "I have waited for this moment," the guide roared. "You, the most powerful beings in the universe, will destroy yourselves, and I will rule what remains." Richard and Hal looked at each other, hostility fading. "Together?" Hal asked, his ring flashing. Richard nodded, the Nova Force igniting. "Together, the Nova Corps and the Green Lanterns, once enemies, now stand together." Richard leads the Novas, while Hal commands the Lanterns. They work together, creating a storm of energy combining the Nova Force and Green Light, attacking the guide. Sam Alexander, though young, proves his worth by using his helmet to unleash a powerful blast of energy, weakening the dark entity. Mogo, from a distance, powers the entire alliance, while Kilowog and Ko-Rel fight side by side, smashing the guide's dark tentacles. The battle lasts for hours, the space shaking with immense energy. Finally, Richard and Hal, combining their powers, unleash a decisive blow, destroying the guide, sending him into nothingness. When the battle was over, Xandar and Oa signed a peace treaty. Richard Rider and Hal Jordan shook hands, their eyes reflecting mutual respect. "We nearly destroyed each other," Hal said, his voice low, "but now we are stronger than ever." The skies above Xandar bore the scars of the battle. The wreckage of the warships floated in the air, twinkling like lost stars in the endless night. Richard Rider stood on the highest balcony of the Citadel, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He felt a rare sense of calm, but a sense of unease rose within him. The guide had been destroyed, but space had never been safe. Below, members of the Nova Corps were working to repair the damage. Young warriors like Sam Alexander, his face still streaked with dust and sweat, were busy repairing the shattered walls. Ko-Rel, tough on the outside but soft in the eyes, was instructing a team of rookies on how to reactivate the defenses. "We must not make the same mistake again," she said, her voice firm. "Xandar must be stronger than ever." On Oa, the atmosphere was no less tense. Hal Jordan called an emergency meeting of the Green Lanterns. The central hall glowed green, but the air was heavy with unanswered questions. "We've been manipulated," Hal said, his voice echoing through the crowd. "But who can say the threat is truly over?" Kilowog, standing nearby, growled. "I don't believe in hasty peace, Jordan. If there's someone behind the guide, I'll find him and destroy him." Mogo, in the distance, emitted a faint burst of energy, as if in agreement with Kilowog's warning. In that moment, an unfamiliar signal rang out over the communication systems of both Xandar and Oa. A low, distorted voice echoed through the channels. "You think you've won. You're just pawns in my game." The signal cut off, leaving an eerie silence. Richard and Hal, millions of miles apart, sensed a new danger at the same time. "We need to meet," Richard said over a secure channel to Hal. "This isn't the end." A week later, on a neutral space station between Xandar and Oa, Richard Ryder and Hal Jordan stood across from each other in a room with transparent walls that allowed them to see the twinkling stars outside. They were joined by Ko-Rel, Sam Alexander, Kilowog, and Kyle Rayner, representing both corps. The atmosphere was tense, but mutual respect had replaced the hostility of the past. "We need to find out who's behind the guide," Richard began, his voice steady. "He's not acting alone. Something bigger is at work." Hal nodded, his power ring glowing a small light. "I agree, but we can't act blindly. The Green Lantern Corps will provide resources, but we need a plan." Sam Alexander, still young and impulsive, interjected. "Why not attack now? We defeated the guide, we can handle anything." He gripped his helmet, his eyes burning with passion. Ko-Rel put his hand on Sam's shoulder, shaking his head slightly. "Rashness will kill us, kid. We need information." Suddenly, the space station shook violently. A dark energy, similar but more powerful than the guides, pierced the space, shattering the transparent walls. From the darkness, a new entity emerged, a giant creature with a body that looked like it was made of dead stars, eyes that burned red like a furnace of hell. He called himself the Eternal Destruction. "You destroyed my puppet," the Eternal Destruction roared, his voice shaking the space station. "Now you will pay." Without hesitation, Richard and Hal charged into battle. The Nova Force flared around Richard while Hal's ring created a giant lightsaber. Kilowog and Kyle Rayner quickly formed an energy barrier, protecting Sam and Ko-Rel. But the Eternal was too powerful. Each strike created a burst of energy, pushing both legions back. Sam, even with Ko-Rel holding him back, couldn't stand still. "We have to do something," he shouted, activating his helmet and charging straight at the Eternal. A blast of energy from him hit the entity in the chest, momentarily stopping it. But with a wave of his arm, the Eternal threw Sam back, sending him crashing into a wall. "Sam!" Ko-Rel shouted, rushing to cover him. Richard and Hal, witnessing the scene, felt anger rising. They knew that without unity, none of them would survive. The battle with the Eternal Destruction lasted for hours, the space around the station shaking as if it were about to disintegrate. Richard Ryder, Nova Force blazing brightly, charged at the entity, each punch a starburst. Hal Jordan, with an indomitable will, created complex structures of light, from cages to energy arrows, trying to contain the Eternal Destruction. Kilowog and Kyle Rayner fought tirelessly, protecting the weaker members of both corps. Ko-Rel, though wounded, stood up, took Sam's hand, and led him back to the battlefield. "We will not give up, child," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. From afar, Mogo, the living planet, sensed the Alliance's desperation. The entity focused all its energy, sending a massive beam of green light to the battlefield, strengthening every Green Lantern. At the same time, the Nova Centurions on Xandar, receiving Richard's signal, launched their battleships to assist, carrying spare Nova Force cores. In a decisive moment, Richard and Hal combined for a final blow. Hal created a giant cage of light, encircling the Eternal Destruction, while Richard focused all of his Nova Force into a single strike. "Now, Jordan," he shouted. Hal nodded, his ring glowing brightly. Together, the cage tightened, holding the Eternal Destruction in place, while Richard charged forward, the Nova Force energy exploding like a supernova. The blow struck the entity right at its core, disintegrating it into a million pieces of light, dissolving into space. As the dust of war settled, Richard and Hal stood panting amid the rubble. Sam, supported by Ko-Rel, smiled weakly. "We did it.